Well, a lot of things to cover in Washington, D.C., and it's not just the debt ceiling, and I don't mean just. That's a huge, huge issue. Under the radar on some fronts is a scandal. It's already scandalous, and it's getting more scandalous the more they dig into it. Congressman Darrell Issa from the San Diego area is the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. He's the GOP's top watchdog in the nation's capital, and not exactly invited to every little reception they have over at the White House. Hello, Mr. Issa. Welcome back.
Well, Mark, as long as I'm invited onto your show, I can forego the White House. It's it's an old building in a bad neighborhood anyway.
Well, that's right, and the Lord knows what they're doing over there. The Lord does know what they're doing over there.
I'm not sure the Lord's even allowed in there.
Well, maybe not. But the SCI, the head of the unions, can get in there any time with the revolving door and the turnstile. Now, you and I were actually at the dinner Madeline Pickens had the other night for Saving America's Mustangs, and we were talking about some of what's going on behind the scenes. Specifically, the fact that you got your hands full.
I was talking to the Gatlin. I was talking to Larry.
Yeah,
Gatlin.
Larry Gatlin. Well, Larry Gatlin.
You may have been talking about Fast and Furious. I was concentrating on people you don't see every day.
No, you and I were talking about that in the reception earlier. Try to follow along here, Darrell.
Okay,
anyway,
I'll work with you on
But
this,
the Gatlins were lovely people, weren't they? But anyway, here's the deal. You've got your hands full there. You've hired more attorneys. The Obama administration would prefer that you just don't make a big deal about some of the things you're looking into, and certainly the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives folks are not thrilled that you have been digging deeply into what's called Fast and Furious. And with all the talk about debt ceiling and everything else, I don't know if everybody is up on this. Tell us what you set in motion this week, because you had an announcement on this, an update on Monday. So where are we? What's happened, and what do you expect to happen as you continue digging?
Well, on this coming Tuesday, we're going to have a hearing where we really relate how this cross-border activity happened, how people in Mexico died, how the Justice Department under Eric Holder failed to let people in Mexico know that basically we were pushing guns and death into Mexico with our own dollars. You're talking about over $1 million. We don't know how much over, but we will eventually, of U.S. taxpayer dollars actually bought the guns that ended up in Mexico. These are high-powered assault weapons, 50 caliber, huge round. And the whole idea of Fast and Furious was somehow it was going to roll up this vast network of drug people. Well, as we begin looking into it, and we've seen the evidence and released some of it in spite of the fact the Justice Department hasn't given it to us. And I keep saying justice because as we've gotten into this plan, what we've discovered is alcohol, tobacco, and fire, when it's 1,800 people, they were sort of used as arms and legs of the Justice Department, who had DEA and the FBI and other agencies that knew what ATF didn't know. But no question at all, this program was a program that wasn't necessary, was the left hand and the right hand, and that's what we've been releasing, knew things they weren't sharing with each other, and as a result, at least one, probably two U.S. agents are dead, and countless people in Mexico are dead as a result of weapons that should not have walked.
It's unbelievable, because what we've heard for the last few years, and you know how the anti-gun lobby has played this, that if you go to one of these gun shows, and we have them all the time out at the fairgrounds and so forth, that if you go to one of these gun shows, anywhere in the Southwest specifically, you're probably going to get those guns into Mexico. And every time we talk about the drug cartels, there's this narrative that comes back to, well, if we didn't have all these easily accessible guns in the U.S., why this wouldn't be happening. Then we find out that our own government, our own taxpayer dollars, are sending guns over in this crazy scheme that they thought was a good idea. That way, if somebody committed a crime, they could, look at the serial numbers and the guns and go, oh, now we can track it to bad guy number 2 or whomever.
Exactly. Well, bad guy number 1 through 20, 19 of the 20 were released. They're not in prison. 19 of the 20 people who did this buying of over 2,000 weapons are out and on the street. And even the one who bought the weapon that ultimately killed Border Patrol agent Brian Terry is not charged with his murder or any complicity with it. That's the kind of non-enforcement we're getting, is that basically all the people involved in this are out on the street, doing their thing, enjoying their life. But, you mentioned gun shows, and so often we hear about gun shows. In this case, these were federally licensed firearm dealers who reported suspicious purchases and got told to go ahead and sell anyway, and in at least 2 cases were told to go ahead and sell to convicted felons, people who the law very clearly said they couldn't buy one weapon, much less dozens.
Congressman Darrell Issa with us. He's the chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee in the nation's capital. His hands full with all sorts of things the Justice Department would rather he's just not digging into. What kind of cooperation or lack thereof are you getting with Holder and Company?
Well, we get very, very little. Once they began to realize that we had more information, unredacted, than they were giving to us, and when I say redacted, they were giving us black sheets of paper with page numbers on them, they've begun to be a little bit more forthcoming because we said, look, if you don't give us the information and we get it through other sources, don't expect us to spend a lot of time figuring out what one line or one phrase should be scratched out before release. That's your job to do, and since you're making pages opaque, we can't do anything for you. But one of the things that's happening, and I think your listeners should understand this, the men and women of alcohol, tobacco, and fire are the real heroes here. They came forward as whistleblowers. Even the acting director came forward having been told by Justice, don't talk to them, we'll bring you in with our lawyers if you're subpoenaed. He came in on his own on the 4th of July, gave a long and detailed testimony that has helped us understand a great deal about what he knew and what he didn't know. And now we're asking the questions of justice. Why would you keep the head of this 1,800-person agency completely in the dark? Why would you keep the ATF agents in Mexico completely in the dark on a program that was sending high-powered rifles to their country?
Now, this guy Melman is talking a lot, isn't he?
He's talking a lot, and
the ATF.
We now consider him one of our key whistleblowers, even though he wasn't early on, discussing anything with us.
But he's been the acting director, so he was in the middle of this, and now he's apparently having a crisis of confidence or a conscience, allowing him to talk a lot, which is helpful.
It's helpful, but he's also delivered to us, and we've got subpoenas out for the actual original copies. He's delivered to us a history of his objecting to this program, sending emails, asking them to make corrections, showing concern, the kinds of things you would expect a director once they see a program that's out of control. He, with 1,800 people, he saw a lot of programs, but he had a large audit trail of things where he tried to get Lanny Brewer and Eric Holder and the people he ultimately works for to slow down, change, do this right, and they didn't.
Well, with everything else going on in Washington, D.C., Congressman Darrell Issa, where does this go next? I mean, because, you're going to have people saying this is such a distraction. Oh, it's important. But do you realize we're on the edge of the Great Depression here again if we don't get something going here on the debt ceiling? And, that's job one right now back there. They're also afraid of you on the Government Oversight Committee, the Reform Committee, that this could be a witch hunt for all sorts of other things, turning over rocks and finding anything you can about the Obama administration. Now, that's a target-rich environment, politically speaking, but with all that on your plate, how do you manage that in times when they say, hey, don't bother with that, Darrell? I mean, come on, let's worry about being able to keep spending money like we do, so we can do more great programs like Fast and Furious.
Well, Mark, I try to put it in perspective for people. There are 3 million employees of the federal government. The administration controls them all. The Congress, my portion of it, has less than 120 people divided between Democrats and Republicans who do oversight, who look and say, where is the waste, fraud, and abuse in government? Now, we work with the IGs, General Accountability. We leverage other resources, but the actual number of investigators is about 30 investigators that work for me whose job it is to find the worst of the worst in government. So if people think that Fast and Furious is not important and that I should be looking at some other area with more resources,
right.
Okay, I accept that. But I always tell people my priority first is defense of our Constitution. Second, and it's a very close second, is the lives of people who are lost because of waste or failures in government, like Brian Terry, who was killed with one of these weapons that should never have been in a bad guy's hand. After that, you start looking for money, and we look for, and with good people helping us in government, we find billions of waste. But that order has to be there, that things which go to the very core of your liberties and your ability to have a Constitution that's respected in the years to come, that's first. And we don't have a lot of resources. So, when people say it's a witch hunt, there are more lawyers in the White House than I have investigators in Congress.
Yes.
And I just wish there were more accountants in the White House.
That would be helpful. Somebody with calculators. That would be helpful here. So in the meantime, I mean, you've hired some more people, I know, when you got the chairmanship and when the House changed to GOP hands. This is not some new department that you're heading up. I mean, this has been a committee that's been there. Before, the Republicans had the big wins in November, and that meant the Republicans get the chairmanship. You've been on the committee, but now you're chairman at the House.
I've been on the short end of the stick and the long end.
Yeah, so you've seen both sides. So how diligent was the previous, let's say, the previous management on this committee? How much did you have to clean up when you got the gig?
Well, we had 2 years of absolutely nothing happening with President Obama. But I hearken back to the days when Henry Waxman was keeping an eye on President Bush, and those 2 years were pretty extreme. And I'm taking a page out of that book. I pale in comparison to Henry Waxman going after every aspect.
Plus, you don't scare people as much on television because we had to look up his nose in high definition. That was, you're more respectful.
Henry's a special guy, but
he sure is.
The fact is that even when I disagreed with Henry, I had to give some credit for, you have to, whether it's your party or the other party, you've got to go after this large bureaucracy, because ultimately those 3 million people, some of them are taking away your liberty, some of them are ignoring constitutional requirements or even congressional directives. And that's what our committee does, is try to rein in the excesses of government as best we can. Fast and Furious is an easy one for people to understand, that it shouldn't have happened. But we find programs that cost millions or billions that should be shut down. And one of the things we do is get it to Speaker Boehner and Eric Cantor and say, look, this has to be a high priority for cutting. The post office is a wonderful example. It's supposed to be self-sufficient. It's losing $8.5 billion this year, and it has a no layoff policy, even though it has 175,000 more workers than their own studies say they need. I happen to think the world of the post office. I just want it to break even while it's doing its job, and it can do its job with 175,000 less workers than it has today, and the American people have a right not to have to subsidize the post office in the years to come.
Yeah, there you have it. Well, it's your tax dollars at work, and glad you're keeping an eye on all of them. And thanks for the great work on this Fast and Furious issue, because without your leadership on the committee, I don't think it'd be seeing the light of day. So appreciate that. Congressman Darrell Issa, back to work there. Be careful. Wear your full body armor, the helmet, everything you need there, and stay in touch.
Got it.
See you soon. Thanks.